Taylor. I am a reporter at The Wrap, and I am so thrilled to be joined by two, I think, certifiable geniuses. We'll go ahead and say that. Peter Sohn, you want to come on out here?
Thanks for having us. Thanks for everyone for coming. It means a lot. Thank you.
When did you start thinking Thomas is the guy?
From the very beginning.
Really?
Yeah, really. From the onset of making the reels, I was using pieces of music that from his extensive library a great deal. And there was a thoughtfulness to his work and a heart to it that just kept pulling us through some rough screenings, you know.
Some composers feel sort of anxious about movies that are temp to their music. How do you feel?
How do I feel?
Yeah.
Well, temp music is always a drag, so no matter how you look at it, because choices are being made and doors are closing just because their music exists. I think the ears absorb what the music is, and it's kind of hard to shake it. So whether it's mine or not, it's definitely a hurdle.
Yeah, but you've been sort of in the Pixar sphere for a long time, obviously. Peter, you've been there as well. Maybe you can talk about that and like how did this experience with Elemental differ from the two Nemos and Wall-E?
I think every movie is different. Characters are different. Interactions, the way you earn trust. So it was always that high end. I mean, the great thing about Pixar movies, and certainly Elemental, is it starts at a high level and it always improves. It's always getting better, and you just want to make sure that you're not bringing it down. Although I'm sure Pete would not let that happen.
That was the exact opposite of what the relationship was. That you kept lifting us up.
Well, you just don't know until you do. I mean, it's all kind of until it's set. You hope it's going to be good and you do your best, but you have to just continue to stay vulnerable creatively. It's kind of what we do, and open to criticism and open to change and trying to improve things at all times. So just keep at it.
That was something I was very grateful for, Thomas, is that you built that trust from the get-go. Like you were talking about it, and that you were I'm talking about the process in that way so that we could remain open about all of it. Even about like the temp and all of it. It was just something that you started off with.
Right, but you have to trust that I'm trustworthy, right? In the end, I mean, it all boils down to experiences, and good days are not as good days, and it was a long period. I mean, it was started I guess in July all the way through March or something. So we spent a lot of time together working on it.
Well, let's talk about the kind of early exploratory days, because this movie is so amazing for kind of capturing different cultures and the experience of immigration, obviously, but through a kind of distorted lens, a little bit of abstraction. So I was wondering, what were those initial conversations like about what are you pulling from kind of culturally and all of that? What was that like?
I mean, yeah, a big part of the conversation was the culture of the fire people and each element, and how are we going to support the story by trying to create something unique. How are we going to do that? Because I didn't want to appropriate any one culture.
Right.
And so a lot of the conversations were about those sensitivities. But then also, just to jump ahead in terms of the film's emotions and the heart, it was very much like talking to a performer in that way. There was the practical work of trying to understand how to capture culture, but then trying to capture what these characters were going through. That was so surprising for me, Thomas, was how you focused on that.
Right, because there's the movie, and how do you address it, and how do you get to the feelings, and in terms of culture, it's tough because it's a made-up world, and there's this sense of other, and so what's the center and what's the other, and in the end, I think we just started trying things as opposed to over-intellectualizing what it meant to be an immigrant. Although I think pizza has to be a good reactor, and so there would have to go through this kind of screen that would just that it worked. you know, and that was a lot of trial and error.
Was that like instruments and you would try different sounds
Everything.
and everything? Okay.
Yeah, I think everything.
Yeah, the process that I got a glimpse of was fascinating because even with some of the cultural exploration that we were doing, it was still based in feeling. It was still based in feeling. And one of my favorite first interactions with you was for Bubble Days, when Wade takes Ember down into the abandoned subway. And your comment, you were very like, cautious about how to even play the music first.
Yeah, well, caution.
Well, meaning like it felt very much like when I'm showing a pitch to someone for the first time. There is a vulnerability that you have to try to play so that, you would talk about the ears are so gullible. And so that helped me prep to hear these first pieces. And you mentioned that, please, if this is changing in my mind, but you mentioned that you were trying to capture trust.
In our relationship or in the two of them?
In that moment with the film.
Right, I mean, did I think that so much as I think I had an idea and I went with it, and you have these ideas, you put them against image, and you have a reaction, and you hope that it's a shared reaction. And I know that that was an early idea, and I know I loved it, and I crossed my fingers that you would too. And those are one of those moments where you think, shoot, I hope this goes well, and you did love it, and it was a great moment for me. I think I saved it for the end of a meeting with the fingers crossed.
Yeah, you knew what you were doing.
Well,
you were playing the film. But I walked away with that feeling of your understanding of where the characters needed to be in a way that did form that trust between us.
Right. And it continues to grow, and you just hope for the best.
Yeah, and now you're both mortal enemies.
Yeah.
What was a particularly challenging cue, or one that required a lot of ideation or test and adjust?
Right?
Yeah.
Really? Well, just how does it open? I mean, in a sense of innocence, which I think you get out of mom and dad, and a sense of pride without knowing what you're proud as a thing. You can't say a person. You're a
Creature, yeah.
a creature of fire. So what is that feeling? And a lot of stories taking place. I mean, we talked about the beginning, the way that the expedition kind of rolled out was quite unique. So it was a question of what's the pace, how are we being introduced to characters, and then what?
Yeah. There was another one I remember with
It's a lot of them.
yeah, no, the montage where they were dating, and the version of
The song.
the song, I'm sorry, where certain moments were being placed, and I remember being so stubborn about something.
Yes, you
about
were.
placement, and but ultimately I trusted your instincts on it, and all the way to the last minute, though.
Yeah, I mean, I always say there's intent. There's intent that we as creative people have, and then other people like me don't understand your intent quite as much as you.
Yes.
Or if it falls short of your intent, it still interests me.
Yes.
In a way that is simply not your intention. So that was one of those moments where you wanted it to be a certain way that it kind of couldn't be, because the song was the song, and the shape of the song is the shape of the song. So at certain points, you just have to kind of give up on old ideas, and it's a hard moment.
Yeah, like you were saying about falling in love with temp, and like there are moments where, like I don't need to follow the temp, but then there are moments where I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a feeling that I have fallen in love with.
You're
So
used to
it's hard
feeling
to
it.
let that go, because animation takes forever. I mean, like, I don't know how much you all know in terms of the process of watching something over and over again, and the problems of losing objectivity, especially when you begin to fall in love with a piece of music and you don't even know why you're in love with it anymore, because you've just seen it so many times. And Thomas knew that and was like almost coaching me to a place of like,
It's a tough moment for I think any director to say, okay, it's not what it was, and it's not yet what it will be. So there's this gray area of maybe where you kind of just are stepping into error or something, and it's a kind of a grown-up thing where you think it can't be what it was, and that's really tough.
And you taught me a lot about the math of music, because
I was terrible at math.
Well, so was I, but it just explaining like, no, it's the rhythm of it. There's just no way to rework it in that way.
Oh, and the song, that was more just a shape. Like, what is it to have an A section and a B section, and if the B section changes here, it's just, you're right, that does well.
It's just a language that I
Yeah.
had no idea about. Yeah.
We should let you talk.
No, I thought these movies do go through 1,000 different iterations, and I love the Blu-ray because you put a lot of those kind of early ideas on there, very honestly and in a really wonderful way. But I was wondering, did you guys work on music that was for a completely different version of the movie that didn't end up seeing the light of
Oh, you
day?
mean were there things that we did that ultimately
Yeah,
were
like
rejected?
for a sequence or character or whatever that gets lost along the way.
Yeah, for sure. I think when Ember first sees her dad sleeping, Pete was very nervous about not feeling sorry for the dad. That there was a sense that dad was where he should be, and that it was touching, but that it was not sad. So that was kind of a language we had to learn: is what's the wrong kind of touching, and is this pointing towards a character in a way that Pete wasn't comfortable with?
Yeah. Pete, anything you remember right now?
Well, I'm just really enjoying getting to talk to Thomas again, to be honest, because I haven't.
We haven't
spoken
talked in
to him
months.
a while. And
Catching up.
What happened?
No, but I'm so grateful, Thomas, for all that you gave to the film. I mean, like it was a tremendous lift that you gave us, and I went through a lot of personal stuff through this film, as you know, and that whole time in this relationship, you were very sensitive to allowing me to try to understand where some of these pieces are when I was going through some craziness, and
Right.
I just so thankful.
Oh man,
Yeah.
well, I think we can only go as fast as a director allows us to go, and sometimes I can be ahead, and I have to remember that Pete has to kind of come to conclusions, and if I push him into conclusions, he'll resent me at some point, or there'll be a moment where he says, I never liked this, and Tom pushed it through. So you do have to kind of find your kind of procedural pace. How fast can these things take place, and when are they wrong, and how patient are you at the moment that they appear wrong? And that's a survival instinct more than anything.
Yeah, you want to talk? I mean, you've been very open. I mean, we've talked about this before, and you've been very open about that you felt a little too close to the material at times, and relied on your collaborators to kind of pull you back. But I don't know if everyone knows this story, but you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I lost my father. I mean, this whole film started with just the simple gesture of being grateful toward those that you love that have taken risks for you. And my parents came to this country from Korea and sacrificed a lot for my brother and I. And I remember going to this event where I thanked them in public. The event was to talk about Pixar or whatever it was, but I saw them here in a theater like this, and I had a speech that was sort of making fun of my city that I grew up in, and when I saw them, I broke down and was very emotional and just said, "Thank you very much, Mom and Dad." I don't remember everything I said, I just remember that I was emotional, and that gesture of being grateful, I'll forever have. But soon after, in the start, I brought that story back to Pixar, and I was telling it just as an anecdote, not as an idea for anything. And my boss was like, "That's your next film, Pete. That is what you have to do." And I was very nervous because he was saying, like, that personal thing you have to use and expose. And I was very scared because of the sheer fact that once it goes personal, you begin to get locked down of like, oh, this is what that was. I cannot shift in any direction because that's what that was, and that was the fear, and it was the whole time. And but it got harder because as I was making the film, my dad died in development, and then my mom died toward the end of production. And so this whole film about trying to thank my parents became something else. And I remember Pete Docter, my executive producer, saying, "You have to put a photo of them at the end in the credits." And I was just like, I lost it. And it was there, I was like, oh my God, this film has turned into something else. It was part of grief, it was part of honoring something, but it wasn't just me, we had hundreds of artists that had shared in this story of first and second gen issues that were all had tied themselves to the film, and got overwhelmed. And I remember with Thomas, like when we were talking about the end, the credits, how to pay respects to them. And I never thought I would be there. I never thought we would be, I thought it was gonna be like a fun, like, okay, what happens? Do they get married? What's gonna go on? But then it turned into, a lot of other artists passed away during the making of the show. And Ralph Eggleston was another one of these amazing people in our lives that had changed me, and we had lost him too. And so it shifted.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it was going to. That's what
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah.
and having collaborators like Thomas who opened you up a little bit.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. But you had a way, Thomas, of letting the work talk for you as well.
Yeah, because talk is cheap in the end, and I can get myself through a meeting by saying things and encouraging something to happen. But in the end, I think I want to park your ears in front of speakers and have you look at images and react. Because it is just a reactive thing for all of us when we watch. We're not intellectual. We're just hopefully absorbed and involved. So I think if we're honest, it bears itself out, and that the right solutions and the right choices do kind of just emerge if you allow it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an amazing opportunity for a composer too, because the images in this movie are so breathtaking, and Pete wisely kind of gives over to the images and the music so often. So I was wondering what it was like finding those moments, and Thomas, what it was like having such a great kind of stage for your composition.
I mean, it would be great if you could recognize that as it's going down, but there's just such an amount of terror just to the doing that you never can kind of bask, or if you do, you kind of feel like step back into the shadows and just do the work. So I never know quite what I'm doing reflectively when it's happening, because I'm just kind of shouldering down and in it and trying, to not get in trouble and make wrong choices. So it's never glorious.
But talk
when
about
it's
the
going
trust
down.
of Pete making these scenes that are just sort of characters running through the street or whatever. Yeah, but then it's all backed by your score. I mean, that takes a lot of trust on your end.
The trust from my end was very easy.
Yeah.
I also, it was, I think, harder for Thomas because he didn't know me, but I had worked with Andrew Stanton a great deal, and he told me so much about his relationship with you, Thomas, that sort of didn't prepare me, but was helping me try to understand a language to use to talk to you. Like I remember him saying, "Don't use the word themes. Don't use it." Like Andrew was yelling at me about this, and but
Get a bad rap for that.
no, but I just remember it was easier for me just because I'm such a fan.
Yeah.
And knowing that, like.
But being a fan is tough too, because suddenly I'm supposed to know things, and in the end, you just want to be open, and hopefully I have enough vocabulary to make adjustments if Pete's unhappy with something. But in the end, I think at best we want to just meet as two creative people.
Yes, and it came to that, which I'm so proud of, because I came in like starry-eyed, and then once it became about the work, and you had a way with focusing that was very helpful.
Can you talk about sound design and how that impacted the design? I mean, Rand Fly is obviously a genius, and I was rewatching the movie earlier, and there's just so many amazing sounds and the languages and all of that, and how that kind of affected what you guys were doing.
It was a tough balance.
Yeah.
There were so many moments where I just wanted the music to win out, or I wanted the effects to win out. But there was so much subtle stuff that Thomas was doing, that like even with voice work or choral work that was going on, that some of the effects would step on, and trying to clear that out became a battle through so many sequences.
Yeah, but there's typically Pixar movies are really have beautiful sound effects as it's all happening in the process of months. But then there's a moment where sound designers say, we're gonna do this, and if I stop and say, well, what's happening, it never works. So I think you trust that there's gonna be a dub, and that the final dub, those things will work themselves out.
Okay.
But there's, to a degree, beyond what I'm hearing, and as I say, what I'm hearing is pretty darn good, I'm barreling forward on my own.
Are you still impressed, like, when you see the final thing put together and all those sound effects? I mean, does it kind of
Yeah, you hope that it just kind of blends together and
Yeah.
you're absorbed in a movie, not even the sound and music, but you're just the story and its beauty and all that. In the end, I think that's the best compliment to a movie is that I like it, I'm leaning forward, and I want to see what happens next.
Yeah.
I remember, you know, in the darkest days when the film opened, you know, it did terribly, right? And
That's a good story
and
too.
then, no, and then it started
Okay.
growing, and then it started growing, word of mouth and everything. And I remember being in another city for press, and I remember feeling this sort of heartbreak, but then I had this email about like how it was beginning to do well, and I read this email, and I put it in my headphones, and I put the opening track on, and I remember walking around with this like growing heart, you know, to that opening track, and it's such an interesting thing because in the beginning I was sad that people aren't connecting to the movie, some not even having seen the film and were dark, and my fear was that like, oh, am I going to see this film in a dark manner now?
Oh, meaning it's suddenly going
Is
to
it
change the
color?
way you
Yes.
see it.
But in that moment of hearing that first track, it was glorious, Thomas. It lifted me, and I remember each step like growing with that love when people were connecting to it.
It's nice when you kind of allow yourself to enjoy the work you've done, and for me, those are typically very private moments. But when I'm by myself and I go, wow, I like this. Okay, it's a neat thing.
Can I ask you if you have a favorite track, Thomas?
Um,
Or is that's too
I think in
Your
terms
movie or
of
any movie?
well,
no, on Elemental.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of the soundtrack, I think like as the kids would say, the first 7 pieces are bangers.
Yes, I'm with you.
All that work on the opening, really. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, that opening was tough. It was really tough.
It's shocking because it is such an arresting, beautiful moment. You kind of are overwhelmed immediately. So.
But you still are having to follow a story and,
Yes.
and the growth of Ember from nothing, from pregnancy all the way to young adulthood,
Yes.
right? So it was challenging just in terms of saying, okay, here's the tone of the music, here's the look of the movie, but here's your characters and how do you perceive that?
Yeah. Well, Pete stepped on my question, but we'll ask
Yeah.
now. How do you feel about the movie being embraced globally? It was a rocky couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I was in Annecy though and stuff. Were you there?
Yeah.
You heard the response.
No, they pulled me out for all of that. I had
Oh,
to
okay.
do some press.
Interviews or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it went over like gangbusters.
Yeah,
It's
like,
like-
some friends told me about
Yeah.
it afterwards. Look, I got an email from a friend that when it was doing well in Korea,
Yes.
and and in the email it just said at the end like, you know, your parents are looking down on you right now, and I lost it. And look, you know, I got to a place of like, I'm very proud of the work that everyone did on it. You know, like if I die tomorrow, I'll be fine. You know, I'll be good because of the amount of work and love we put into something. It's a romance, you know, between a young woman and a young man, but also a father and a daughter. And it's funny that that's a risky thing to put forward in movies these days.
Right.
It's very interesting that like just putting forward love can be attacked so easily these days.
Yeah.
And when talking to folks that have seen the movie and some folks connecting in the way that they do through that lens of love and appreciation, yeah, it's what it's about.
Yeah. Thomas, what did you think when you heard that? It didn't do well in Korea. It was like a blockbuster in Korea, right? So like, and it was unexpected too.
But that was after the American opening?
Yeah, after the American opening, yeah.
Well, you know, it's discouraging when you work so hard and you
Yeah.
like something so much, and you know, these things come out, and you know, as I think I said, it was kind of unglamorous, you know, the way it began, but who cares in the end? And I think it's as much a statement of what movies are now and how they get put out there. Is that we're kind of in a, I mean, where are we and what are we?
Yeah.
In terms of product and artists and things.
What do you think it was, Pete, that made it such a hit in Korea?
I have a lot of things that I think, but
I mean, this is the forum.
no, I've thought about it a lot, but creative work, consciously or subconsciously, part of you gets in there.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of decisions that were purposeful, and there were a lot of decisions that weren't. But I think there were some that weren't, or subconscious, that dug into something that felt more of the culture in terms of what Han is, in terms of meaning that this is like a, I'm also a K-drama guy. I love K-drama. And, so there's a balance of like, that's melodrama. Then there's also the balance of sincerity, of a love for parents, that is very much of our culture, that I think connected,
Yeah.
But there are intrinsically Korean things in there
Yeah.
that, purposeful or not, got in.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too because you look at the DVD and you did try some things that were a little off the
Yes.
romance. Yeah. Wade's mother was a villain at one point.
Yes, Wade's mother was a villain. They were garbage incineration company at first. They just ate garbage and melted it all down. And there was this sort of Godfather 2-esque war between a father and a daughter.
Go on.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, again, that all came out of my dad dying, interestingly. I thought I was like, closure on that, let's do this version. And like, the world was so angry in this film, and it was reflecting a lot of what I was feeling. And I didn't know it, and around one of the screenings early on, I remember Pete pulling me aside, and Jesse, Pete Doctor, just pulling me aside and saying like, hey, I know, in his supportive way, I know what you're going through, and is this the film that you set out to make? I was like, no, Pete, I want to do something hopeful. And then he reminded me of a pitch that I had done early on, where I said, oh yeah, the dad tells the daughter, the shop was never the dream, you were the dream. And I remember him saying this, and it sort of reconnected me to the original part of this thing, that gratefulness and what that sacrifice was. And that became a North Star. So all those other crazy ideas started to boil away, and then it sort of, became more pure into what that love was.
I love that. Hashtag release the garbage eater cut. Okay, we're gonna take a couple questions about the glass making sequence.
It was intentional. Early on, trying to understand what the stakes of the movie are, even though they're lower than your usual Pixar, but it was all about the love of his father. That was what the driver was, that was at stake. And if you introduced a passion that moves her away from the father, all of a sudden, that drive and those stakes started to water down. And so was a very clear push to just make sure that Ember loves what she does. She's not great at it, but her intent of trying to run the shop is pure. And so thus, that approval from the father and affection for the father all became important to make sure that it was sincere.
Thomas, you want to talk about that cue?
Well, there are two, right? When the counter glass breaks and she just fixes it and she's just not thinking. I think that's probably the best thing of all, is that what she is most naturally is what she isn't intellectually. And when she makes the glass pitcher at the Wade's dinner table, and everyone is just looking at her so honestly that she can't even recognize it herself. It's like, I just did this. That's just touching, I think. I mean, it's just really touching to be observed by others when you're not expecting to be observed. So, I don't know what that means musically, but I do like it dramatically.
Related to that, do you guys have discussions about like, this should be a juxtaposition, meaning like the music should actually, almost in like a Goodfellas way of soundtracks, where it's like this should almost counteract what's happening on screen? You guys had those discussions, or that has kind of come naturally, where it's like, the joke is that this is an intense moment, but the music's beautiful, or vice versa?
They talked about Goodfellas nonstop.
I think jokes have to work, and if music intellectualizes jokes, it's never gonna fly. If the joke is at stake, the music is always gonna lose, I think. Jokes are too important. I mean, laughing is so fun,
Anyone else? The question is, things that you maybe wanted to include as a child of Korean immigrants that you couldn't, or anything else?
Thomas, do you remember Cinder only spoke Irish? Do you remember those versions by any chance?
I do.
Yeah, that was a big piece of it, was the language. Like, Cinder only spoke Irish. the language was written by David Peterson, who had done Game of Thrones and all these amazing languages, and trying to find a way to make it foreign sounding, like my friends would tell me about my Korean, but also be fire, right? And so, you know, we get the idea of like, if my parents were arguing the next door neighbor fire, it should sound like a fireplace. And so that started the pops and crackles of the language. And so we had Cinder only speak that language. As a first, I call myself second generation. Some people say first generation because you were the first born here. But in that world of, you know, cultural brokership, where you are the translator of these two lands, you know, and my mom didn't speak a lot of English, and so much of my life was translating appointments at doctors or the dentists or going to the movies, you know, and you know, explaining, you know, what was happening in a scene that she didn't understand, and there was a whole version of the movie where it was talking about those issues and finding another way to communicate outside of language, and the bow was born out of that, meaning gestures and what that means, and you know, in this Korean American brother sisterhood that we have, I love you is not a big thing in that world, and but the actions of feeding and taking care of you and all of that equals I love you in that culture, and it was, but yeah, I missed that one of the ways.
Great question. Anyone else? How do you repay a sacrifice so big? Where did it come from?
It came from so many places of universal connection. Like, I felt like we were in story rooms where, you know, you would have been in a story room with us and shared that truth, and that would have triggered someone else saying a very similar truth of, it feels like a burden. And I didn't have the relationship with my father in the way that Ember did. I fought a lot, and I didn't understand. I was so ashamed of my Korean heritage in the 80s. I was like, no, I want to be American, and I want to push away that side. And but that idea of the burden came out from a lot of that sort of frustration, and a lot of people talked about that, and so it was born to a lot of people. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Anybody else? Is there anything you want to change about the movie that you spent
That's a
7
tough
years
question.
working on?
It's like, what I hate most about what I did in the movie is the score.
I have no problem talking about all of it, meaning it's there are so many decisions being made, and so many other ways. I feel like currently it's more visual things. There are logic things and visual things that, because the film, the characters are so difficult to make, I would complain to Thomas a lot about, like, these characters are so difficult, that forced us to get the story locked down to a certain degree so that we can produce the film. You know, Wade was a nightmare to produce. I say it with full fury and anger at how impossible controlling effects are. Like, fire was our first primary goal, and when we turned on all the systems, she came out like this Balrog, this really terrifying fire exorcist-eyed Lord of the Rings character, where you're like, how do you fall in love with beasts? You know, it was all like the 90s Disney animation, you know, and but at the same time, there was new technology. Everyone worked really hard throughout the years trying to control their fire. But there's no shadows on her. You can put appendages on her, but the fire will cover up so much that she became easier. She wasn't easy, but easier than Wade. Every situation that we put Wade in, if it was in the basement, he would disappear. If you slowed down the bubbles, he'd turn into Jello. If you changed the lighting, he'd turn into Casper, the friendly ghost. Like, everything. And so, on a visual thing, watching it, I'm haunted by so many things about it. Long-winded way of saying that, but there are stories, but, you know.
Andrew Stanton said something great about looking back, and he called it tree bark. And the idea is if you look at a tree from far away, it's beautiful, but the closer up you get, you notice all the things that are kind of not wrong about it, but and that you kind of accept them.
Yes.
You know, and I think it's kind of important to say, okay, I mean, again, we fall short of our intentions often, but you, the listener, the viewer, doesn't necessarily know our intentions, so it may be easier for you to like something that we find fault in. But ultimately hope that you're just able to forget that, like tree bark.
This is an amazing technical achievement, which we didn't really talk about because we were talking about the music and the beautiful visuals, but yeah, I mean, you went through it on this one.
Well, it was fun going to Thomas's studio to see the work in a different light, because we were so embedded in that shot production world that all of a sudden, because you got early layout and even boards, you started with none of the shots having been really animated, to a certain degree, right? And
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
they were mostly boards in the beginning, but then we would replace the boards with final shots. But at work, it was so different because sometimes there was no music, there wasn't anything, but coming to your place and seeing you put some of the music for the first time changed the work.
Right.
All of a sudden, you started seeing different ideas out of it, different feelings, and I began to appreciate the work in a different way in his studio.
Right.
Because when you're in the shop production, you're just so stressed about like, how many hours is that gonna take to render that? How long is that gonna take? And
Literally made a processor smoke, you told me, right? Yeah.
yes, that's right, that's right.
That can't be true.
No, it is true, there's photos of it, because there's a moment where Wade catches some sandbags and walks into water, and some of those shots in there are the hardest in the film because it has to render all the transparencies of Wade's water and then the water that's pouring out. And I was just telling Dow, a friend of mine, that like there's a shot of a hand going on to a close-up of a hand, and it took 1,000 hours to render a frame of this close-up. And so they had to buy new cores, and so we got up to 150,000 cores to render this film out. And that scene, that evening, one of the water cooler things failed, and it started burning the servers. And the security took a photo, and like, maybe it was indirect, but like, we all believed that it was the rendering.
You did it.
Yeah.
You had to call the Geek Squad over. Yeah. Anyone else? There's someone way. Where did your inspiration come from? And he said it sounded a little bit like Lion King.
Yeah, I didn't listen to The Lion King, and we did Temp with The Lion King, so that would all be accidental. I guess we were all just grabbing. I have a core group of players, and we kind of get together and just try different things and process vocals, and again, just kind of through trial and error find language, as opposed to saying, I know, Lion King. It was never going to be that. It would be tough for me to do that. But inspiration is a tough word anyway, because for me it's just kind of getting through a day and finding something and just kind of moving forward as opposed to like aha moments. I think the aha moments are kind of later, where you think, wow, I see pattern here, and I see something that I've a place that I've kind of gotten to, but there was really no intellectual design musically.
The last question over here on the other side. Animation versus live action, if the process is any different. Animation is not.
Well, I mean, I think in animation, everything is fabrication, right? Everything is an idea that turns into an image, and with live action, sometimes there's accidents, and there's a little bit more kind of free jazziness to it. I mean that I don't mean that literally. But as a movie, you would always approach it in the same way, which is here's a bit of action, here's a bit of comedy, and how can music serve it? When does it go away? When does it stop? When does it start? All those things you have ideas about, and you execute those ideas. You share them with the director, and you engage in a conversation about its success or failure or anywhere in between, and you just try to improve things as they go. So I think, to be interested is the same in animation and live action, and the approach on that level is exactly the same.
Amazing. Well, let us thank these two amazing